there was a moment in time when you had an engineering team that, for whatever reason, wasn't performing. And I believe you decided to simply start from scratch, to let the entire engineering team go and redo. And I know that there are many founders who find themselves just like, engineering just isn't working and I don't know why and I don't know how to fix it. And I've never heard of anyone being willing to do what you did and go that radical. So first, I'd love to know what actually happened. What were the results? And if you could go back and tell yourself now, what would you do differently the next time? What would your advice be to someone else who found themselves in your exact position?
Thank you so much. And I'm more than happy to talk about it. It was definitely one of the most stressful time of my life. And it wasn't overnight that we hired this engineering team. It was over the course of 6 to 9 months. We hired an engineering team. We grew it from about 5 people to roughly 40 people or so. And the person who was in charge of the engineering team, really nice person, very different standards for the engineers from my expectations. And at some point, I think even at engineer 20, I was like, these engineers, they're not super fast moving. They don't really have any product sense. I'm not really sure. But again, back to the implementation, I'm like, but if I let the head of engineering go, then we're really screwed. So I just let this go on. And at some point, I was like, if I just look to the future, I'm like, if a year from now, we have double the engineering team or triple, God forbid, and they're all of the same quality, then our company's just not going to survive. We're not going to scale. We're not going to be able to serve our customers. And ultimately, like our app was breaking all the time. Our customers weren't getting paid. They weren't able to find work on the platform. I was like, maybe we should, let some of these lower performer engineers go. But in my mind, I mean, one of the things we do at the company is always to talk about what is the ideal and possible outcome. And for me, the ideal and possible outcome was I wake up tomorrow, there's a brand new engineering team, everybody's fantastic, exhibits our standards. I'm like, why not do that? So what I did, and just so you know, the implementation was actually difficult because you can't just build a whole team overnight. But what I did was I did start a side engineering team just for me to work on a quote new project. I think I only hired about 5 new engineers before saying this is enough. Turns out these 5 people were doing more than the entire like 40-person engineering team. And then at that point, just decided we're going to have these people leave. And of course, it was a very difficult decision because you hire these people, you feel a sense of responsibility, but I knew that that was the right decision. Let them go. And then implementation wise, obvious general severance, et cetera, having try to place people in other places. Could not have been happier with the results. Like actually, it was almost like an overnight change of morale. The product team was much happier because they're like, holy crap, these engineers are moving very quickly. I was happier that the stress was suddenly gone. And of course, our customers were getting served better. So I think that while it was very painful in the moment, I really delayed it for some time. Could not have been more thankful for the results. And so I will say, like, even today, we have a much larger engineering team and other teams that are much larger. Whenever we're faced with these issues, again, I tell the team too, like, let's figure out what the right decision is. And of course, since we're dealing with humans, we want to make sure that we take care of the people who have been with us. But doesn't mean that it should stop us from making the right decision for the company, even if they're very difficult.
Wait, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And I hope that others watching this take inspiration from that and really do it. I think a lot of times people hear something like that and say, wow, that's great, but I could never do that myself. And the
Oh, it was
answer
very
is,
stressful in the
I'm
moment.
sure, I'm sure. But the answer is you've proved that it can be done. And it sounds like the results were phenomenal.
I think generally there's a stigma around, terminations and letting people go and layering. People also don't want to be in a place where they're going to stagnate. They're not going to succeed. They're getting negative feedback all the time. I think that's not great for them. So better to be in a place where there's a much better fit. And I mean, a lot of these people were super nice, but they were a really good fit for a specific type of company, and ours wasn't it. And so now actually what we try to do is we anti-sell the candidates. We set, almost negative expectations of what it's like to work here. And so people aren't surprised about both the pace and how hardcore we have been in running the company.
Fantastic. I love the anti-sell. That's what a great idea. The last thing you want is someone to come in thinking it's going to be a cakewalk, then it's not, and then they leave. Why did you bring that person in the first place?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then a thought that I imagine people have when they listen to this is, well, wait a second. If I let that many people go, first of all, yes, it's painful. Each individual human, I like these people. I want to help these people. That's okay. But on a exterior level, if I let an entire engineering team go, doesn't our reputation of the company become one where either the company is failing, it's like you've let that many people go, oh God, don't want to be part of that, dagger falling, or it's just a brutal and cutthroat and heartless place, and therefore why would I ever want to join it? So all of a sudden people stop. This is perception, it's not
Of
reality.
course, yeah.
Right. But that people will no longer want to join the company. Now, that is a very common fear. Can you please tell us what actually happened? Did people no longer want to join the company?
So first of all, our best performers, they all came to me and they were like, thank you for doing this, like for having the courage to do something difficult, but we feel so much better because we now feel like we can go at the speed of light, we can really serve our customers. So your top performers are going to thank you for holding people to high standards. If anything, I would say for us, we didn't have any regrettable attrition during that period of time. The best people were like, this is awesome. Like, I mean, we think about it as a athletic team, you want to build the world's, best athletic team. And I'm so glad you're holding people to high standards. Now, certainly, like if you have people who leave and they all, say this was the worst company, of course there's going to be some like fallout, but that's why I think in the implementation itself, it matters how you do it, right? Like we didn't put everyone in a room in a Zoom call and just say it suddenly. Like we gave them context. And again, we try to be both generous with our severance. And then I actually personally told everybody who was impacted that I'm happy to help be a reference, help them find their next job. Most didn't take me up on it, but I think that the fact that I offered it made them thankful that, look, I care about them. I want them to land in a place where they're going to be happy. And so I've had people who were impacted negatively by that event, but then have since referred their friends here anyways, because they had a good experience. At the end of the day, it's about how you feel, not the exact set of events. If they feel like they were treated with respect and like this was understandable, you want a different type of profile, most people are going to be reasonable and actually like I said, I still have people who have exited who are referring some of their friends who are there like, oh, this person may be a better fit. So I think how you implement that is important. But no, I mean, morale went up, not down.
That's awesome. Now you mentioned a key thing here, Wei. You said the implementation of how you did this. You didn't just do a mass Zoom call and then go click, goodbye, see you later. So what was the implementation, and what would you do differently next time? Well, hopefully it won't be next time, but what would you advise others who are in this situation to do to have it go even better than it went for you?
Well, first of all, probably be more hardcore in how you hire. And then the moment you see your team start to grow, but the standards are not what you expect them to be, nip it in the bud early on. Like, layer on layer the manager or move the manager, you may have to remove the person doing the hiring, which is all things we're doing.
And I'm going to jump in here because what I actually meant was tactically on the
Yep.
day that you let people go, how do you let people go? Like,
So
do you actually have a group meeting first and then have one-on-ones with everybody? Or do you have a one-on-ones first and then a group meeting with those who remain? Literally, tactically, what kind of meeting you had with whom, when?
we had one-on-ones with everybody. I think the one-on-ones are actually quite important. Of course, I understand sometimes it may not be practical, but at least make it a smaller group. We don't want it as a big group of like, hundreds of people. So we didn't even it's not like we had a gigantic company at the time, but we essentially had someone, whether it was their manager, even if if or like someone in HR, or just someone there as a person talking to, like you and I are doing right now, having that one-on-one conversation. And we kept it short just because we wanted the person to have time to process. Sometimes it's a lot to process. So we did stick to more or less a script, but we said, okay, look, we wanted you to have some time to process. Afterwards, we also even asked for feedback, like, please send us your thoughts. And so, but everybody had at least one-on-one, and it wasn't done in a group.
Perfect. So you had one-on-one scheduled. Were they 25 minutes each? Were they 50 minutes each?
They were 15 minutes each. 15
Perfect.
minutes turned out to be, I would say for some people, it was almost too long. Like they were just like, all right, I don't want to be thinking about this. And for some people, they wanted to talk. So I don't think there's a perfect amount of time, but I do think people appreciated that it was a one-on-one conversation.
Perfect. So you schedule them all on one day. You have the managers and you involved, and each manager had maybe well, it was only 40 in total. So probably how many managers do you have doing the one-on-ones? How many do they have each?
I would say each manager or HR person probably had around between 5 and 8.
Okay, great. So you get this all done within a 2-hour time span.
Yes.
And were you able to schedule them all within that 2 hours?
And I
Great.
think
So,
people knew. So in many ways, I mean, these people are smart. They're not, they had a sense. So it was,
well, once there were 40 one-on-ones scheduled all at the same 2 hours, they knew.
yeah.
Right. Okay. And then so you go through that very tight time frame. And then did you ever have after that an all hands meeting with the remaining team members of the company to explain what happened and why you did this?
Yes.
And what did you do in particular during that meeting? And did it work or did it not work?
I was very vulnerable with a lot of the mistakes we made. I think though that's a time when you take ownership of the things that you did to contribute to the problem, not like these people are terrible. Like this is not the time to finger point. Like, yes, they were not the right fit, but you were the one that brought them on. So like what did you do to contribute to this? Like, hey, I let this go on. Like things you learned so that people have confidence that you didn't just do this and like take nothing away. I was pretty vulnerable. Like I'm really bummed about the results. And then like let that sit for a while. I think it's too easy to be like, and onward, because these are human beings. So you also let people there to this group remaining to ask questions like, hey, what happened, whatever you're comfortable with. And then also allow people to ask questions afterwards as well. Just like, hey, some of you may be processing, just ask questions. Though surprisingly, I think nobody asked questions afterwards. They were like, actually, I thought you did a great job. And then finally, like once people have had time to process some of the information, you do talk about things that are more forward looking. And here, because of the things we've learned, we're really confident about building a really great culture. And then you also remind them, we're going to continue making mistakes. By the way, this is not like, hopefully we don't have to go through this particular thing again, but we're going to continue making mistakes, hiring mistakes. We're going to continue making, I mean, probably every mistake under the sun you can think of running a company, you're going to make them. And just tell them the reality is this is not the last challenge we're going to have, but we're really in this together. And, I'm confident that we're going to continue learning, continue improving. So I think people seeing that progress was important.
So I'm going to do a recreation here, and I'm going to say what I think you likely said, and then you tell me if I got it close. Folks, thank you for coming here today. Today we let go 40 members of our engineering team. Here's the reason why: they weren't the right fit for the company, and the responsibility lays with me. I brought them on. I onboarded them. I was the one who hired the manager who gave them feedback, and that's my responsibility. And I feel really sad. I feel sad that I screwed up in this way. I feel sad that these people had to be let go. And I intend, well, maybe you let it sit there for a while. Maybe you let it sit with that sadness for a while. And after a few moments, maybe you then said, and here's what I intend to do to make sure it doesn't happen again. I intend to now look at and write up recruiting standards that I agree on with the head of engineering and not hand it over to the head of engineering entirely. I will commit to giving regular and consistent and direct feedback to everyone who joins. I will, whatever other things you said you would do. And also, I want you all to know that this will, as much as I want this not to happen again, as much as I want there to me to not make mistakes again, I will. And as a company, we will make mistakes again. And that's natural and normal. The key is for us each time it happens to look inward, ask what we did to create this, and make sure we come up with a plan to make it likely that we won't do this again. And if we continue learning that way, we'll have massive success. Was it something like that?
That you said it far more eloquently than I did, I'm sure, at the meeting, because to be honest, like for moments like these, I try to practice as much, but because I was being vulnerable and real, I fumbled way more times than you presented. You spoke so eloquently. I think I was so nervous. I don't, because I want these people to still trust me, and to know that there's, I'm going to continue improving. But yeah, I think it was something like that, but with far less eloquence.
But also probably far more real and far more authentic.
Well, I don't know. You did a great job.
Well, thank you. That was amazing. This is going to help so many founders who are going to listen to this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. And like I said, if you are hardcore about hiring, you can at least mitigate some of this from happening. But
that
here
is
we are.
true. Awesome.